Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello, it's Rory here, and with me is Ken. How are you doing, Ken?
Not bad at all. A very warm welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. This is episode 109. We bring you topics that are of interest to student counsellors, qualified counsellors, supervisors, tutors, and today is a great episode. We're going to be starting off by speaking about working within two placements. So that may be counselling within two placements when you're doing your studies, or after graduation, if you're working in multiple agency settings, what to consider in those different environments. And then we're going to be moving on to an interesting topic, Rory. I like this one. Working with angry clients. And the realism is here, we do sometimes get angry clients. I know I've certainly had them.
We do. And I'm going to be talking about how to work with anger and welcoming anger as an emotion as you would any other form of emotion in the therapy room. All emotions should be equally as welcome and equally as available. And I'm giving some observations on how to work with anger, what anger's about, and how anger can be a little deceptive unless we really, really understand where it comes from and what its purpose is.
Like that. So that's coming up. You're going to stay tuned for that. That's in Practice Matters with Rory. And we're going to be ending episode 109 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. And today we're going to be looking at making a peace with our failures. This is an exciting topic, one that comes up again and again, and one I'm looking forward to digging into, Rory.
It does, and it comes up in our Facebook group. All the questions here come up in our Facebook group. If you're not sure where our Facebook group is, then all you have to do is type Counselling Tutor into the Facebook search. You'll find us. We're a closed group, but if you knock on the door, a friendly soul will let you in, and you can join over 25,000 other members. There's tutors, there's students, and also there is supervisors, all talking about topics in the world of counselling and psychotherapy. Come on in and join us. We want to see you.
Join that conversation. And starting off now, our first topic today, counselling, potentially at two placements. And I guess with two areas we can look at here. One is for a qualified counsellor who is maybe working in multiple agency settings. The other one is if you are a student and doing practice across two different placements. And they do differ slightly, although you may get some similarities as well there, Rory.
Yeah, absolutely. So as students, getting those placements hours is crucial because it's part of the completed portfolio. For some, it's 100 hours. For some, it's 150. But those hours need to be in supervised, face-to-face contact with the client as part of the course structure. And, of course, we do not attend, known as DNAs. And the fact that sometimes placements will take you in the second year of your studies. Some students decide to have two placements. Well, that's a brilliant thing. There can be some challenges. One of which is, of course, you're working to two separate policies and procedures. Each organisation has their own policies and their own procedures. And I think it's really useful, certainly because if you're a student, you're going to have to evidence what the policies and procedures is, specifically with one awarding body, is to work out and to remember the difference between the agencies you're working, because they may have very, very different policies and procedures.
100%. And you called on to write about that in your final portfolio if you're doing a second year level 4 and you kind of need to evidence, do some case studies of the places that you've worked in. You're going to be referencing those policies and procedures. So it's to keep that in mind. And of course, if you're qualified, the same is true, but we don't have to write about it in assignments. And it's just worth noting that it's almost so subtle it can disappear, but there is a difference in policies and procedures when we may break confidentiality. And it's about reminding ourselves under which umbrella we are working in which agency so that we are clear and able to be clear for the clients that sit with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're talking about clients, Ken. It's very possible that your agency is focused on two different client groups. Some agencies focus on people who've survived abuse. Others agencies may be a more general practice, where I used to work at mine. Anybody who came through the door, there was a number of issues that people came in to try and resolve and work with. So it's worth thinking about that when you go for a placement interview for a second placement, thinking about the kind of client groups they serve. And one final thing, and I think it's as equally as important and equally as frustrating, here in the UK, we have what is called a disclosure and barring service. And that is a set of checks that a potential counsellor goes through to make sure they're not a serial killer or an axe murderer. In other words, they go through a police records check to make sure there's no offences that have been disclosed, which could be detrimental to a client. So I jokingly mentioned serial killer or axe murderer, but there are offences which would automatically debar someone from working with clients, and that might be someone who's been in prison for very serious or any sexual offences. And with disclosure and barring service, the idea was it was portable, so you can pay a little extra and you get a PIN number, and what happens is that you just your new placement puts the PIN number into a website, and they can see if any new offences have been added on or if anything's changed in the disclosing and barring check for the person. But some placements make you go through the whole procedure again. I've had students who've paid extra for a special PIN number to allow the DBS to be transportable. However, what's happened is that the agency's policy is to have a brand new one, and that can take time. Sometimes I've heard up to about 2 or even 3 months. So, the idea of I'll just get another placement, get my hours in, very possible you could be held up. So that's worth thinking about. So if you're thinking of 2 placements, think about the practicalities of that disclosure and barring service check.
Yeah, so there's some kind of potholes in the road to just be aware of and to be mindful of if you are working across multiple agencies or multiple placements. But there are some benefits to doing that as well, specifically as a student. If you're working across 2 different agencies, you may be seeing, like you say, Rory, different client presentations from the different agencies. But more importantly, from my perspective, is the different ways that the placement may be run from a managerial point of view, from a support of you as the placement counsellor within that. There's a lot of learning, because if we go into one placement, we work only in one placement, all we will know is their policies, their procedures, their management style, and they can vary quite significantly from agency to agency.
Absolutely can. And I think there's a great benefit in having 2 placements, and that is there's more opportunities for networking. So you're going to meet more colleagues, you're going to meet more supervisors, more job opportunities at qualification, or if you're a qualified counsellor, more job opportunities, period.
Yeah.
And also you're going to get a wider practice base. So, I can't say enough about having a good amount of general practice under your belt, seeing lots of different presentations. I think there is a bit of a danger in people specialising too early on in their careers, because if that happens and they need to change and they haven't got general practice experience, that could be difficult and it will show up at an interview. So the definite advantage is networking, a wider practice base, and also just seeing how 2 different organisations run, which is a great advantage if you're going to maybe, run an organisation. You get a wider view of the industry and how it works.
100%. And in my role as clinical supervisor, I've worked with students in placement who have, I'm using just a very general example here, been working within a placement. They've struggled to keep their hours, get their hours, targeted hours for their graduation. So I've taken on a second placement, and I've sat and been with supervisees who've kind of expressed how supportive the second placement is in compared to the first one, and how surprised they are by that. So they can be so very different. And this stands you in good stead when you do go out. If you are a student, you now graduate and you go out and you're looking for an opportunity to work within an agency, a paid job within an agency. It kind of empowers you to know that there is more out there. It's not just what you saw within your placement. There is a range of different ways of working, management, different funding routes, and there is, I guess, choice out there that we have.
Yes, and don't forget that the more, if you're in 2 agencies, you get any CPD or any events they put on, you get to go to those as well. So there's definite benefits about having 2 placements. Absolutely.
Definitely. And just before we leave that topic, just that final reminder, if you are a student, you are needing to write about this in your assignments, just speak to your tutor, specifically if you have to do different case studies with different clients and you're using different agencies. Have a chat with your tutor. They would be able to walk you through that just so that you meet your awarding body criteria. Moving on, I guess, Rory, to working with angry clients.
Angry!
Ah.
Yes. It's steam coming out of it. Yes, working with anger. I'm going to talk about a very much maligned emotion, anger. It's sometimes misunderstood by clients. It's sometimes misunderstood by therapists. And I'm going to be talking about and exploring what anger is, why we should welcome it in the therapy room, how we contract for someone who's angry, and also a little bit about what anger's about, because it is a secondary emotion. More of that in my segment.
Yeah, Practice Matters coming up after this short message. This short message basically is an overview of the paid-for service we offer here at Counselling Tutor. We have so much free information that we put out, like this podcast you're listening to right now. There's no charge for that. We have a website packed with resources called counsellingtutor.com, which is free, but we do have a paid-for resource called the Counselling Study Resource, and that's coming up now. Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Express that you're angry, and most people take a step back. Why? Because anger is usually connected with violence, which may make some people feel frightened or even threatened. Did you know that anger is a secondary emotion, sometimes thought of as a bodyguard of other emotions? Shame, fear, or sadness can make people feel very vulnerable, and sometimes when these emotional buttons are triggered, it's anger that rushes out to provide a defense mechanism, which can sometimes mask what is going on for a client. As the saying goes, attack is the best form of defense. Individuals may use anger as a way of relieving stress or to solve a problem instead of enduring it. Everyone at some point in their life will experience anger to varying degrees, from mild irritation to full-blown rage. Triggers can be unjust treatment, feeling criticised, not getting what you want, or sometimes just plain old boredom. So is anger a good or a bad emotion? Well, to paraphrase punk rock singer Johnny Rotten, anger is an energy that can be used for positive as well as negative behaviours. Individual may use anger as a way of relieving stress or to solve a problem instead of enduring it. Civil rights campaigner Rosa Parks was rightfully angry when told to give her seat up because she was sitting in a white-only section of the bus in racially segregated Alabama in the 1950s. The anger generated by this injustice sparked what became known as the Montgomery bus boycott, which lasted 381 days and was a significant milestone on the journey to racial equality in the United States of America. So how do counsellors work with anger in the therapy room? Well, first of all, consider any risk issues. If you're a placement counsellor, this should be done by your referrer. So your referrer, the person who's referring your client, should do some kind of referral assessment and assess if the client is ready for therapy or may be moved or may need a specialist anger management program, or it could be that they may need other forms of help, such as help with substance misuse or alcohol misuse. If you're a private practitioner, especially someone who works alone, trust your gut instinct. If you have a clearly angry client making an appointment, it may be worth thinking about, what are the risk issues, and do you feel comfortable working with someone who's clearly angry when actually phoning up for an appointment? Other things to think about: it's useful to use the boundaries of the contract to put in place some form of safety for you, the practitioner. Consider inserting a clause that you can be as angry as you like in a session as long as you don't trash me or trash the room. A colleague of mine put that into her contract many years ago, and it works surprisingly well. Try to carefully assist the client in identifying the triggers for anger and the underlying emotions. It's probably the underlying emotions that are actually the trigger for someone becoming angry. If you can work with those emotions, it may be the client gets a handle on the angry feelings that they're having. Give the client space. If they feel themselves getting angry, an option may be to cut the session short, or even just to take a little break. Make them they could walk out the room, just take a few minutes before they come back in again. Sometimes you have to be quite creative around anger. Explore with the client what their view of anger is. Sometimes being told that anger is a negative emotion, never to be displayed, may make someone even more angry. It's worth remembering that anger management and counselling someone who feels angry are very different approaches. Anger management is a structured program which may include group therapy, educational input in a classroom-based setting, as well as one-to-one therapy. And remember that anger, like any other emotion, should be welcomed in the therapy room. It takes both patience and courage to work with a client who may present as angry.
Thank you as always, Rory. Such an important topic. Anger. And I guess what my takeaway is, it really is about looking to self and how we as individuals interpret anger. If anger sends us running and hiding because of what comes up in us, then we're not able to be there to service the client. Just really, really good topic there. And of course, Rory's made a super duper handout, which you can have for free on working with anger or angry clients, I guess. And you'll get that by going to counsellingtutor.com. You just want to click on our podcast tab, which is right at the top of the page. Go to episode 109. It's going to take you to today's episode. Everything we've spoken about today is mentioned there, all of our show notes, any links to external resources, and right there within the page, you can download Rory's super duper handout for free just by putting in your name and your email address, and we will send that to you with pleasure. If you are already a member of our paid for service counselling study resource, well, that handout has already been added to your handouts vault, so you can just dive in and enjoy it right there whenever you wish. And we're moving away from anger and onto making peace with our failures. It almost seems like the other side of the scale. I'm thinking of anger as explosive and very, very immediate and very in your face. And then I'm looking at the other side, failure, and I'm thinking timid, hiding.
Yes, and it was Thomas Edison, the person who invented the light bulb. So if you're listening to this and you can see a light bulb in the room you're listening to, it was Thomas Edison who invented that. And he had 1,000 goes at making a light bulb. And it was on the 1,001, so history tells us that he succeeded. And someone said to him, aha, you're Thomas Edison. You've had 1,000 failures at making a light bulb. To which he responded, no. He said, I know 1,000 ways of how not to make a light bulb. And I think that's the mindset of working with when things don't go wrong. I could share with you that I didn't pass. Notice I didn't use the word fail. I didn't pass any bar one of my diploma assignments the first time. And when I did my teaching qualification, I passed them all off the bat. And there was about 6 months gap between me finishing training as a counsellor and started as a teacher. And I didn't get any smarter in that 6 months, I can tell you that. What I did find out is the technique of how to pass assignments. It wasn't a case of me being any smarter, it's just I knew the technique. And I think sometimes through the years of teaching, I've had students in floods of tears when I've said that, their assignment's been referred. And I always think of the word fail as first attempt in learning.
I like that, because that puts a positive slant on it. And it's one of my favorite topics, failure, because I look back at my own life and it is strewn, dotted with multiple failures. And I now today say, if I don't fail 2 to 3 times a day, then I'm just not trying hard enough. Really, because when you're trying hard, that's when you fail. And it's interesting for me that when we look at how the education system, specifically in the Western world, is set up, it's set up to paint failure as a negative thing, that you don't want to fail. You've got to get everything right all the time. And you've penalized in schools, or at least it was during my day many years ago, where you would have red pen with a big F try harder. You failed. You didn't make it through. And that was a thing of shame and negativity, where in reality, there is not a single thing from the light bulb to look around you, any object you see, doesn't matter what it is, it was born of failure. It was born of having an idea, trying it, getting it wrong, adjusting it, trying it, getting it wrong, adjusting it. And the road to any success is failure. But yet that word carries so much weight. We enter into cycles of maybe self-defeating cycles with failure. We can get stuck in failure. It can hold us hostage, where in fact all failure is a stepping stone. It means I stepped on the stone the wrong way, or it's not the right stone. At least I know that now. What learning? Let me try this one. Nope, that's the wrong one too. and so we go, and the successes are always born of failure.
Absolutely, Ken. And it is difficult. And I think the worst thing to do is to compare yourself with others. I know that it's very, very easy. And I have done this. I sat in a class and I saw other people shoot through their assignments, pass their assignments off the bat, get high marks. And I was the person sat with the assignment with lots of kind of annotations saying, you need to put this, you need to put that. But 16 years on, I'm still in practice. And the others, as far as I know, bless them, I catch up with my former peers from time to time. They're doing other things. So it doesn't always mean if you don't pass the first time that you don't get longevity in something. It just means you get extra chance to reflect on what you've not done correctly and put it right. And I'd echo Ken's sentiments. I've worked with some incredibly talented, in fact, all my students, I better be do the right thing here. All my students are incredibly talented people who just didn't fit into that very narrow room or corridor of criteria, the criteria corridor, which is very defined, and you've got to get in it in a certain way. And I've read some brilliant assignments that I've sat back and I've thought, wow, that's brilliant. Just doesn't hit the criteria. And it's so frustrating. And I have to say, as a former educator, it is a difficulty in education because it is very narrow. And sometimes I just don't think it takes the talents of the people I used to teach into account, quite frankly.
I agree. Measuring anything like that, specifically in academia, is tough because it's almost like a predefined shape. That is the criteria. It's this shape over here. And any shape that is near or encompasses the shape that you're trying to get it through, if it's not exactly fit, it's going to be referred back. No, go back, trim off that, move that bit over there until it fits through the predefined shape. But life in general is less predefined. It is more fluid. And failure is not just linked into being a student and maybe not getting through an assignment. It can be in every part of our day. And I think it's about understanding how we as individuals define that word failure. So an example, and I'm just taking this at random, maybe you meet with a client, you're in private practice, you meet with a client, and the client doesn't come back. And you then are thinking, did I say something? Did I do something wrong? Is that a failure on my part? And it's interesting to examine what failure means to you, because that could just as well just be that client's choice. In fact, at the end of the day, it is that client's choice whether they come back or not, and there's less to do with us and more to do with them, potentially. But it's worth maybe taking that word failure. Why not, for this week, kick it about a bit, write it down somewhere, put it in your diary to look at the word failure. What does failure mean for you? And is it a negative word? For me, it was. It was a very negative word. Today, it is a positive word. And as I kind of led into this, if I don't fail 2 to 3 times a day now, then I'm just not trying hard enough. Because when I'm trying to reach something, I'm going to step on failure, small and large, along the way. And that is part of the journey. It's part of the resistance that stands before anything that is worth getting. If it crushes us and leaves us, holds us hostage, then we're kept from reaching the goal, whatever that may be. And I wonder if that's failure that's holding us back, or whether that's our interpretation of failure that might hold us back.
Indeed, and I think certainly the fear of failure, it stops people doing anything. I'll try this, but what happens if I fall off? Well, if you fall off, you get up again. Don't let your fears get in the way of your dreams was a great quote that someone told me a long time ago, and it's one that I carry. But what a great podcast.
Indeed.
We talked in the introduction about having 2 placements, moving on to practice matters, working with anger, and I told you, of course, about anger being a second emotion, and finally, looking failure in the eye and seeing it as the imposter it is. What a great podcast. And as always, stay grounded and stay safe.
Take care.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. Counselling Study Resource, or CSR for short, is the world's most comprehensive assignment guidance and study support resource for students just like you of counselling and psychotherapy. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.